me. Before we start, just a few housekeeping notes. Um, we would recommend in the upper right-hand corner where you have this view icon that you go on the speaker view and not the gallery view. That will help us later to show the slides. Also, we would like participants who are online to be on mute right now until we can later on during the Q&A have people unmute and ask their questions. In addition to that, we encourage people to use the chat function at the bottom of your screen in case you have questions while the proceedings are ongoing or any comments that you would like to have. So these are a few housekeeping items. The last one being we will record this to push this out to those folks who cannot call in here tonight. With that being said, I would like to welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us at this meeting hosted by Green Across the World and Keeping Track, two well-recognized Vermont organizations. Sue Morse from Keeping Track and Peter Lynch from Green Across the World will be your hosts tonight. Quinn will help us with keeping it together technologically. My name is Andreas Nolte, and I'm currently the chairman of the board at Green Across the World. I will give a brief introduction first, and then I will hand it over to Peter and Sue. The theme of tonight's meeting is crossing boundaries. As you all know from your own daily experiences, especially in these dark times under COVID constrictions, we are living in an increasingly troubled world, in large part actually, because of our abuse of natural systems, natural resources, and also, quite frankly, each other. And the world is pushing back, as we know, with hurricanes, typhoons, and cyclones, wildfires, droughts, floods, diseases, and now even a crippling pandemic. Our responses often exacerbate the problems as we tend to turn on each other. Therefore, the purpose of this webinar is to begin a conversation that will lead us to find better ways to treat each other and the natural world that sustains us. In order to do this, we need to cross boundaries, as our theme suggests, and especially artificial boundaries like social, cultural, linguistic boundaries, academic boundaries, political boundaries. And we need to identify and learn to work with each other, human and non-human, in our world as natural partners. We believe at Green Across the World, at Keeping Track, that conversation, conservation, and a sense of connection to the natural world are front and center of our well-being. Tonight, we want to illustrate the importance of cross-cultural understanding through youth exchange. We want to highlight connections to environmental and social justice, to climate change, zoonotic disease, and human development and economy. Both of our hosts tonight have worked on these important issues for decades. Sue Morse is founder and science director of Keeping Track right here in Vermont. She's a highly regarded expert in natural history and one of North America's top wildlife trackers. Since 1977, she has been monitoring wildlife with an emphasis on documenting the presence and habitat requirements of bobcat, black bear, Canadian lynx, and cougar. Peter Lynch serves as founding executive director of Green Across the World. He taught science in public and private schools for decades and has been engaged in field education through youth travel and student exchanges since 1995. This work has been in China, Japan, Bhutan, Thailand, Puerto Rico, and Senegal. And now I'd like to give the floor, or rather its online and virtual equivalent, to Peter Lynch. Peter?
Thank you, Andreas. I appreciate that introduction. My name is Peter Lynch, and I can't tell you how excited I am to be doing this with Sue Morse. The only thing I like doing better with Sue Morse is being out in the field with kids. This virtual world is what we are living in now, but at some point we'll be back in the wilds. Andreas mentioned a couple of things. I think this, we do know that the world is in a great deal of trouble right now, and it's largely of our doing. But one of the things we don't want to do is to scare our students or give them the sense that there's no hope. We want to build our programs and structures in a way that encourage them and empower them. And in fact, give them the sense that it really can be a lot of fun to work together on some of these very real challenges, and extremely rewarding with each little success. So with that said, I think I'm going to jump right into, see if I can get my screen sharing going here, jump right into a slideshow. And here we go. So you should be shortly able to see a full screen with our logo on it.
Looks great, Peter.
Please scream if it's not working.
I don't know. Why I can't hear this?
All
right, I've opened the Zoom. I don't know.
I'd like to remind viewers, I'd like
Very
to remind
nice.
you to mute your button. Thank you. All right. So Green Across the World is, we're engaged in encouraging both environmental and cultural understanding and awareness around the world. And to do that, we work largely with high school and middle school students, both online and through travel experience, although travel experience has not been on the table since January of this year, and may not be for a while. I will tell you that all of the images that you will see were taken before January, so there are no masks and social distancing is not being followed. This goes way back to 1998 when Sue hosted a group from Guangdong province in China, where I started a relationship in 1996.
I am not hearing anything.
We are busy planting a Chinese spruce tree there in Sue's herbarium. This is one of only 2 slides, by the way, that I have that are taken with Sue. We are quite certain that this school group from China, from the affiliated high school of South China Normal University, was the first one to visit the United States since the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949. And it's quite possible that it was the first group since in the United States. Interestingly, another school group arrived for a different reason only half a year later in Vermont. So we begin in China because this is where Green Across the World really started. And here Roy Erno from Burlington is helping to release fish fry into a stream in the hills northwest of Guangzhou. And these fish fry are native species that were extirpated, that were essentially could not survive some horrible pollution conditions. And you may be able to see the water here is a lot clearer. In general, in China, if you are below human habitation, the water is in very poor condition. And this is an area where they have been systematically trying to change that and make the stream livable again. So the parts of China that we visit are here: Guangdong province, Guangzhou, Hong Kong. You'll see one image from the north, from this western corner, this one of Fujian province. And then we've also been busy here in Hainan. So this image from the hills, mountains in Fujian province is really quite remarkable. These circular structures are Kujia villages that were built between 500 and 600 years ago. It's not common to see architecture that old, and it's just a stunningly beautiful place. See some pretty cool tree toads, neat animals there, and to draw some pretty neat creatures too. But two students had worked on, they both shared a project of drawing butterflies that had been collected. We had a Lepidopterus with us on that trip. We've also worked a fair amount in Japan now for a decade. These students are engaged in a school-to-school exchange with schools in Tottori Prefecture, Japan, and Burlington and Essex high schools. And Tottori is the red prefecture here. It's about a quarter the size of Vermont, but has a similar population and interest in environmental stewardship. So it's a natural fit. And in 2018, Vermont and Tottori Prefecture signed a sister state agreement. So we are now sister states. And some of our students became more Japanese than the Japanese on these trips. We also see some pretty cool and old architecture here at Nagayori-do. Another place we engage with is Bhutan. These students engage with us online. And this is something we hope to come back to at the very end, but we clearly with COVID about international travel with underage students is not a great idea. And we will be engaging online and are engaging online with students in Bhutan and Senegal. If there are educators out there who would have connections elsewhere in the world and would like help with online interaction using our tools, we'd be happy to do that. We have an asynchronous website called Youth Green International, as well as the capacity to use help with Zoom, curriculum development, that sort of thing. So the Bhutan is a tiny little kingdom in the Himalayas east of Nepal. There's a map in the upper right-hand corner where you can sort of pick that out. We have partnered with schools in the Thimphu region here, Trongsa in the center of the country, and Bumthang up here, not too far from the Chinese border. So that's pretty exciting. There's still subsistence farming, tremendous amount of subsistence farming in Bhutan. The cultural game of the nation, the national sport is archery. And the traditional architecture and scenery is just stunning in that part of the world. Also, we'll jump around the other side of the planet here to West Africa. This is Senegal. The textiles are really something, as you can see. And here they're planting trees in a schoolyard to help develop shade there. Senegal is in the western corner of equatorial Africa, and we work with schools in Dakar and in Fatick down here. I threw this slide in just because I knew it would get Sue's attention. This is one of the sites that our students saw. And here is a village in Gorée Island in Dakar, which the serenity and beauty of this spot belies a tragic history. And this is from a slave house with a door of no return, where well over 1 million people were exported to the New World, and many of them, of course, never even survived the trip. Never mind the ghastly experience once they arrived. And to see this and realize that these were, the forebearers of these incredibly friendly and welcoming cultures just makes it hard to bear. And then, of course, we do engage in Vermont. This is our state capitol dome. For those who may not be in our area, we're in the northeastern United States here. And here, the activities that students participate in range from, they're all environmentally centered, but they range from governance. Here they're touring the State House, and they have a chance to discuss natural resource management with politicians. They will visit farms. This is an organic farm called Golden Russet. Industrial sites. This is Omia's Quarry in Middlebury. They get to go to International Paper where we're not allowed to photograph. And the idea is that, you know, we're starting to look at, well, is the human economy really something that unique? No, I believe it's very much a part of the natural economy. So we need to start paying attention to it as if it is part of the natural economy and create much better fits. They also get to have some fun with fish and wildlife. This is Charlie. He's now a graduate student at Stanford, I believe, in biomechanics of all things. And go out on the Melisaica, the University of Vermont's fishing vessel. And we try to end our activities at Keeping Track with Sue Morse because, you know, after experiencing all these sites and questions about natural resource management in the natural world, to come home and to see how nature does it, I think is tremendously important. And I deeply value the message and philosophy that Sue shares with our students about the importance of connecting with nature, getting along with it, giving them their own space as they must give us our own space, and not always by choice. And that we'll come back to that connection with a student quote after Sue is done with her set of slides and images. But this is an interesting one. This actually goes back to 1998 too. This is Lydia here, and he's preparing to send a message to a bear. The black bear had clearly scent marked, and Sue has coined that term. She'll let you know what that is, I'm sure. Has scent marked by biting and rubbing on this branch right here. Whoops, sorry. And Lydia has just decided to try sending a message back, which is fun. So I wanted to end my part of the slideshow with a couple of images that are kind of an analogy to the experience that a 15-year-old might have traveling to Senegal or Japan or China for the first time, which is when you engage with a very, very different culture in a new place. This is a bamboo viper from Hong Kong. It's unnerving, a little bit scary, but also strangely exciting and beautiful. And this animal, I think, is absolutely gorgeous. And once they get their feet on the ground in, whether it's Japanese students coming to Vermont or Vermonters going to Senegal or wherever the experience is happening, they quickly find out that this is really what it's like, that kids around the world have much more in common than they do differences, and that we need to cross those cultural boundaries. As Andrea said, we're trying to cross boundaries, we're trying to think systemically and see the connectedness of the planet that we live in. So with that, I am going to stop screen sharing and turn this over to my good friend and colleague of all these years, Sue Morse. Thank you.
Thank you. So I too have a show that I would like to share, but not before I fully join Peter in expressing my immense gratitude for all these years of these shared experience with our colleagues from China and Japan. And of course, joined by our students here in Vermont. And on behalf of Keeping Track, I'm here to say it is without a doubt one of the most profoundly beautiful and meaningful experiences I've had working with Keeping Track and working with people all over the world. So thank you, Peter, for making this happen. So I will start my PowerPoint show, and we'll get that up on the screen. There we are. Just about all of our clients get to see this place. This is the top of Bobby Knob, and it's fitting that most of our Japanese and Chinese clients have come here because this really gives us the big picture view of one of Vermont's larger core habitats. That's a habitat that's not fragmented, not dominated by the human animal. There aren't cities here, there aren't roads here, there aren't railroad tracks here. There's just forests and all the life within them. And so it is here that we steep ourselves and learn about our relationship to the planet and think about how we can do a better job of living sustainably within this habitat. Okay, I'm trying to advance it. Okay, so what, all right. So we are in the company of the wildest wildlife in Vermont at Wolf Run, where we have these classes. And certainly my favorite among them is the bobcat. And I've studied bobcats here for just about 45 years. And it's thrilling for our guests to really experience the habitat of these creatures. And while they don't get to see bobcats, they see plenty of evidence of their existence on the landscape. They certainly see plenty of evidence of the bears that are all around us. And mind you, this is thrilling for most of our clients because they don't live in a habitat in which bears are close neighbors. So it really is a wonderful reminder of just how big and beautiful the world really is and how each of us, wherever we live, can play a key role in securing and stewarding this wonderful planet for the future. This is a Green Across the Pacific Chinese class. And here is the Totori Japanese group in the fall, typically. You can see the clothing is changing quite a bit. It's a lot colder in the fall. But you see the bear claw marks on the beech tree that they're all admiring. And we learn a lot about how these animals are living out there, but there comes a time, i.e. lunchtime, when we have to eat and we have to stop thinking about how the bears and the bobcats are eating, and we have to gather around a warm campfire and enjoy each other's company, get to know one another better. And it is during these times that we really encourage our guests from far away and our students from Burlington to really mingle and enjoy the warmth of the fire and the warmth of the setting. Of course, beauty is all around us, and we have to fully provide plenty of time to slowly go through this wonderful world and see what's out there. And I always am thrilled to see what catches the fancy of some of our friends from afar. They love their mushrooms. They're just mesmerized by the beauty of the mushrooms and the fungi. We do talk about what the wildest wildlife of a place like Vermont truly need out there, and they need their security. They need to be in a habitat where, you know, their world isn't going to be suddenly turned upside down because of human activities, be they industrial or whatever. And so we talk about that a lot. And it's not a sermon on the mount. It's just simply what's needed. What do these animals do out there? How do they make it? Can they make it in a world that's fragmented by roads and neighborhoods and shopping centers and trains and what have you? And of course, they can't. The wildest wildlife really need the big core habitats, and their mortality when they try to interface with our habitats is quite significant. We do talk about the problems that are ongoing in our world, and we talk about the degree to which the human animal is often at the heart of those problems. But like Peter has said, we don't turn that into a negative experience. We try to be very positive about the roles that we can play, even as young people, in making the change. One of my favorite sayings from Gandhi is, be the change you expect of the world. Certainly one of the animals that fascinates our friends from China and Japan is the beaver. And they've never seen anything quite like this. And of course, you know, beavers cut down trees in order to make dams and build lodges. And this is just fascinating to our young learners and really engages them first and foremost in learning about a keystone critter, a critter that profoundly influences the well-being of many, many, many other residents of the wild world out there. So here's one animal that could dramatically change life for so many other things. And this is the lodge, and the people that come in the fall, Totori, they get to see scenes like this. This is the wetland. They all come here. And there's the lodge. And so making these impoundments in turn makes habitat for all manner of critters, from mink and frogs to moose. They all live here. They all benefit from the world that the beaver has created. Our students love to find amphibians, to pick them up, enjoy them, learn about them. Frogs, this little wood frog is a wonderful diversion. And the animals at the edge of the wetlands, we talk about them as well. The coyotes, the foxes in this case, the bobcats, the snowshoe hare, the deer, as well as the moose. These animals are making a living as a consequence of this very diverse world that the beaver has made happen. How nice it is to live in a world where beavers can be beavers and make their ponds and flood whole stream valleys with their ponds and not be criticized for making floods. So we emphasize the importance of leaving space in our world for our wild neighbors. And the moose certainly benefit from all of that and some. People just can't believe that moose weighing, 800 to 1,200 pounds, walking around 6 feet tall at the shoulders, are actually living in this place. Well, here's evidence. And we use tracking to teach how we can do a better job of seeing out there and finding evidence, like these moose hairs on a snag. The moose did a limbo, but couldn't quite clear the bar. And so there is hair left off. It's fascinating. They can touch that. They can take pictures of that. And they do. And they can experience the moose even though they don't get to see the moose. They know they're out there. And they're thrilled. And in the fall, the Totori group gets to see the sign that bull moose leave when they're seeking to woo cows. They dig craters in the ground. We call them rut pits. And they leave scent messages in those pits that stimulates the cows and gets them turned on, you might say. So this is very exciting. And believe me, you can smell the moose in this habitat, and people are thrilled by it. Bears really command their instant respect and affection, and they're mesmerized by the idea that bears are all around us. And although we never see a cub like this, we certainly see plenty of evidence of all age classes of bears inhabiting the forest. Bears are really creatures of their sense of smell. The sense of smell that a bear can employ in life is So important. And so the bear can figure out what's going on. Did that human touch this branch? Are there nuts at the end of this branch? Is there another bear around? Is it a male? Is it a female? And so they begin to get a sense for how these animals live and something of their personalities as well. And of course, the importance of food for animals like bears. Forests are better for bears when they're whole and not cut up and fragmented and not caused to become lesser because the biodiversity is compromised. Better, there should be lots of species of trees and shrubs that make food for bears and other wildlife. So it's fascinating. This bear really climbed this tree. They're really getting something to eat. One of the things I learned about is the scent marking, and Peter alluded to that in his talk. And suffice it to say, bears are constantly leaving messages for one another by rubbing on trees and biting them and clawing them. And here's a mother bear showing the little one how to do it. She's clawing and biting. And so we can see evidence of that. And this is Peter's son. He served as intern on one of our trips. And he's just fascinated by this very demonstrative sign that the bear has left on a white birch. So we come to expect that it turns out there's certain places where we can look and find these things again and again. So there's patterns that our students learn about. White birches are important. That's a pattern. Red pines are important. That's a pattern. This tree's been marked every year, multiple times for decades. That's a pattern. We use the skull to reenact the actual biting process. And we can insert the canines into the holes created by the upper and lower tooth and actually see how the bite occurs. This is very kinesthetic, very powerful to feel that jaw work the bite that was made by a bear. We can take pictures of the hairs on the trees where the bears have rubbed their bodies. And I learned years ago that it's not a bad idea to put our own hands on these trees and send the bears a message of love. And this is a picture I took years ago of some young children. And I didn't really have any expectations of this other than I thought it was important for the students to feel the sensation of doing that. And so indeed they did. Now this picture was taken on one day, Tuesday, and here it is. The remote camera that's hanging in the tree takes a picture of the children sending the bear a message of love, and that is on the 9th of August. And on the 10th of August, look who shows up. What is the message? Well, there's great humility out there and great fondness too. So we're going to send messages of love. And hereafter, all of our groups go through the motions of sending messages of love. And this tree is getting hammered by the bears. The bears are all over it. So in a world where we're trying to think about our economy, our human economy, how we make our food, how we use our forest products, how we build our homes, how we transport ourselves, we need to be mindful of the larger economy in which we fit. And that's what we do out there. Now, of course, we have fun in the process. Like Peter says, it's very, very stimulating to share these experiences with people from all over the world, not just your neighborhood. And in the summer, we have a concluding get-together at Wolf Run where we have a dinner and they get to experience things like corn on the cob and mushroom and marshmallows. And we're building community. We are bringing peoples of the world together. We are crossing boundaries. We are sharing. We are finding value in life. And we're committing ourselves to better stewardship of that life. Okay. So,
Wow, thank you, Sue. That was wonderful.
Sorry, there, I had to unmute myself. Yeah, that, fantastic. Thank you, Sue. It really was spectacular. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the sharing from different parts of the world. One of the things that I think is vital to solving some of the intransigent problems that we have is intercultural understanding and an openness to try to put oneself in the shoes of a different culture, because we find that cultures really do think differently. And for Americans to go to a foreign location and or even to a Navajo reservation, a place where people are different here in our own country, and begin to tell them how to solve their problems is absolutely the wrong thing to do. It will backfire. You have to start by, Sue said this is not a hard sell. We start by offering, trying to understand the local culture in ways first. And then maybe it's sort of like a smorgasbord that you say, well, here are a bunch of things that we do where we live, but maybe some of these ideas will work for you, maybe they won't, but it's up to local cultures to decide how to manage that. So I'm really happy that you brought that up. We're very close to going into question and answer time and entering into a larger discussion. I want to share the screen one more time though. And I'll put this quote from one of our students up. Let's see if I can get it full screen again. Here we go. This is something that is, unfortunately, I got some windows. Let's see if I can, there we go. This is something that a Chinese student wrote in her journal after visiting Keeping Track. And I don't normally read what's on the screen, but I'd like to read this because it speaks to the slides that Sue showed that show children scent marking a bear tree and the bear responding to it. And there's something very visceral about that. So Liu Zimei said, when we were keeping track in a family-owned forest, the leading forest manager, Sue, showed us some trees where mother bears hide their kids from adult males. She told us that these refuge trees and other parts of the forest must be linked with patches of trees that provide animals with a complete habitat. I looked at the trunk marked by the bites and punches of the giant bears, and I realized how natural this is, like the necessarily linked bathroom, dining room, kitchen, and such at our houses. This understanding came so naturally into my mind, it felt like a part of my consciousness, and the environment around me formed a link with my mind. That's what we really need to have humanity do, not just these kids. We need that epiphany that we are the Bears family and the Bears family is ours. So that is sort of the final message I want to leave the group with. We want to enter into Q&A, and I thought I'd just toss up a handful of questions. I don't know how many viewers are educators. I think these questions are relevant to all of us, but for those who are educators, one thing we're hoping is that the recording of this conversation and presentation today can be used as a springboard to start constructive conversations about with young people about how they can help us solve the problems that sadly we have created and left for them. So I'm just toss those up, and I hope you've had a chance to look through them a little bit. And I think at this point, Sue, unless you have something to add, we can turn it over to Quinn to see what questions have appeared in the chat box and to manage questions. And I'm sure Sue and I would both be happy to respond to any thoughts and questions that folks have. So we thank you for your time and for bearing with us and staying with us through this. And we'd love to hear from you at this point. Thank you.
Hi, Peter. I haven't seen anything come through the chat yet, but folks should be encouraged to go off mute and definitely chime in with any questions that they might have.
Okay. Or observations.
Yeah, I was going to say that, or observations, yes.
Hi, I have an observation. I don't know if my audio is working, but this is Sean Smith.
It is, yeah.
Great.
Hi, Sean.
Hi, so thanks to both presenters. It was such a beautiful presentation. Always love to be a student of Sue's. So I think just one observation that just to take off of what the student wrote and what was just read, the quote that was just read by the student. In terms of the role of conservation in creating connectivity and large swaths of habitat for wildlife to meet their needs in without being bothered by us humans, it seems like what would be helpful is as the land conservation movement moves forward, for there to be a shift of purpose away from the things that the humans want to get out of the property and more towards setting that acreage aside first and foremost for wildlife habitat enhancement, wildlife habitat use and enjoyment, and to try and work towards educating folks more about exactly what these critters need, because I think that there is such a misunderstanding by so many people about just how much land is needed and how much peace and quiet and privacy is really needed for so many of the species to thrive, whether it's mating, birthing, raising, or preparing, in Vermont for a long, cold winter potentially, in the face of who knows what kind of natural feed is going to be available to them. And this is shifting all the time. So I just wanted to share, that's my experiences in land conservation, almost 30 years of land conservation, and seeing the emphasis of most land conservation projects be on conserving land so that people can bike, hike, ski, snowshoe, snowmobile, hunt, trap. And it seems like very little attention is really focused on the animals. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Sue, do you want to comment on E.O. Wilson's observations?
Well, yeah, he, in his latest work, Half Earth, talks about the grave condition that the planet is in now. On our watch, biodiversity is plummeting and extinctions are ever present and continuous, and genetic diversity as well as flat out biodiversity is really under siege. And he believes, and he's one of the most respected biologists in the world, he believes that what we need to do as a world of cultures, plural, all of us together as one community, we need to save half of the earth. Half of the earth needs to be permanently conserved and put aside as wild habitat for all of the rest of life, exclusive of us. Well, that's a big, big vision. But it, as he says in his own words, it is commensurate with the hugeness of the problems we've created, including climate change and an extinction rate that is off the charts. And so, yeah.
And I would argue, I'd add to that, that that's actually good for us.
Yeah.
That getting conservation right and sharing the planet with our fellow beings ultimately is how we're going to get ourselves out of the problems that we face.
Well,
Yeah.
the need, maybe one thing, the need for conservation is really part of what we're trying to do, so that people realize how important it is. That's why we bring the kids out there to Sue, and Sue explains to them what it looks like and what needs to be done. And that's why we bring kids over from China or from Japan, or hopefully one day from Senegal and Bhutan, to take a look at how things are done here. And our kids go over there and look at how things are done or not done over there. So, and that's really important, because the young generations, the high schoolers, the middle schoolers, they need to see what's going on and what needs to be done. Because quite honestly, I'm too old to this. I'm maybe responsible partly for the mess we are in, but the young generation, those are the ones we try to reach and show them what needs to be done.
Never too old, Andreas.
Oh, no.
So George, you raised your hand. Would you like to chime in?
Yes, please. You know, my impression based on nothing, well, not on nothing, but is that China has a very, very aggressive state capitalism. And I'm wondering, the Chinese students, what sense do they have about the place of conservation? And actually, what is your sense of what the government's thoughts are about conservation in China?
Oh, thank you for that question. I think it's a very big question. It's almost worthy of its own seminar. The Chinese students are, many of them come from Guangzhou, which is a city of some 10 or 12 million, plus some undocumented workers from the countryside. So for them, Vermont is remarkably rural, and their experience of keeping track is an eye-opener. You know, I think they're cautious about what they will say about their own government for obvious reasons. But the government does, it's a mix of lip service, I think, to the need for conservation of, they are going hell-bent for glory on renewable energy. They're building wind farms and solar systems, perhaps to the detriment sometimes of conservation. And it's, I think, a very, very complicated pattern. China's a very large country with as many unique habitats and ecological zones as the United States. And there's less control, central control, than we sometimes think. So there's a lot that happens at the provincial level. And in Guangzhou, in Guangdong province, this is actually probably a good story to tell for the importance of cultural understanding. One of the things they've been working on is cleaning up the Pearl River. Initially with point source pollution. Now they've got the more intractable problem that we have in Lake Champlain or in some of our other waterways of non-point sources of pollution. But starting over a decade ago, they started an annual swim of the Pearl River in the city of Guangzhou. And to do that, people had to register, they had to go through health checks. We were there the second or third year that they did this. And one of the Chinese students who was participating was, it turned out that her father worked for the Guangzhou City Water Works. And she said, oh yeah, they draw their water from the East Branch of the Pearl River many miles away, and it's still not potable. You can shower in it, brush your teeth, but you have to boil it before you drink it. So they cook with it. But they dump that fresher water to the tune of something like 300,000 gallons upstream just before this swim. And I talked to my colleagues in Chateau. He was in one of those slides that Sue showed, and said, boy, if that happened in, say, the Hudson River in New York City, and the press got hold of this dumping of fresh water to make the river more swimmable, there'd be hell to pay. It would not be good news. And Chateau said, no, you don't understand. What the government is really doing is galvanizing public support for this effort, uniting the people around this effort to and creating buy-in to the idea. They know that they're not done. There's still more work to do to improve. But it's little things like that where the way a culture might view or reflect on a certain action that we have to understand better if we're going to collaborate. But the bottom line is, maybe just as is true in many parts of our country, the Chinese have a long way to go with conservation. And there are some absolutely stunning places that are in need of much better conservation efforts. But there are places where they are trying.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, it was a long-winded answer, but you brought up some, I think, some very complicated topics. Perhaps one thing I've learned over the years is that the more I engage with China, maybe the less I understand it. It's a big, complicated country.
Dave, you shared an observation in our chat. Would you like to share that here?
I mean, it's right there in the chat. Is my microphone working? Great.
It is.
I was struck by the shrinking the distance of the planet and shrinking the distance between our culture and building bridges, and how that creates an understanding of wildlife and their habitat needs, and also enhances my sense of our shared humanity, how we rely on one another on a finite planet, and by accentuating our similarities rather than our differences, that's a key to building, multicultural education. And I just hadn't seen this connection to wildlife education. This is all new to me, and it's interesting. I do work for a nonprofit as an educator for 30 years, and we are increasingly working with a more diverse culture of refugee populations surrounding our Concord, New Hampshire headquarters, and have met some teachers that have enabled us to use natural spaces outside. And consistently, I learn more than information that I impart. And I was also struck by differences between these kids who are from Africa and from Asia, who were in refugee camps, and how they naturally understand some earth skills, climbing trees, building fires. They can identify plants that are edible, and their American counterparts are sort of fearful of plants because it might be poison ivy. And this is a place where the refugee kids, the new Americans, the English language learners actually excel outside the classroom in a way that our classroom education doesn't honor. Those kids are all outside in COVID right now, learning outside while they can. And so the connection with the teachers has enabled that for me.
Wow, great.
Great.
Thank you for sharing that. That's if you're interested, I'd love to talk with you going forward beyond this webinar.
Sure.
We work with Burlington High School, where there's also a large refugee resettlement program. And one of the most moving experiences I've had is when this fantastic young woman who was a refugee of Nepalese origin from Bhutan, who was able to travel to Japan with us on a special, wasn't even a passport, it was something that Senator Leahy's office managed to get for her. And she gave the closing speech at the farewell dinner for that program. And boy, was the whole room was brought to tears by what she shared. I do want to add very quickly, because I think you're absolutely right that finding our commonalities is very important. I also think in a multicultural world that celebrating the unique aspects of culture is equally important. I mean, we don't want to melt pot the entire planet and have it all look like the CBS News anchor with that accent. We want to celebrate each other's cultures and ways and enjoy them and enjoy the different foods and musics that we have around the world. But do that through common understanding. So thank you for your comments. I appreciate it.
Peter, Dave submitted his contact information on our forum. So Dave, thank you. We'll reach out to you after this webinar.
Sure.
Yeah, and for everyone out there, I mean, Megan, on the sidebar, you will see the link to a form that you can fill out with your contact information. And if you have questions even after this meeting ends, or concerns or comments, please feel free to share that with us. I mean, that's why we are here. That's why Sue is here. We would like to be in touch with you. This is called a starting point tonight. Crossing boundaries, a starting point, and that's how we see this. From here on, we would like to be in touch with you and communicate with you.
Great. Yeah, and one of the things we'd be happy to share with you is what Green Across the World can do for you, particularly if you're an educator. If you fill out that form and would like to learn more about our Youth Green International asynchronous website for connecting classrooms or groups around the planet, would like to learn more about these sort of 6-part lesson plans, or about the schools in Senegal or Bhutan that we work with and how we can connect them with you. I think I think educators, whether formal or informal, are working terribly hard right now. And this is just a difficult time to be in education. And we want to share this work with you, but also make it as easy as possible and do as much of the back end work as possible to make some of these ideas come to life for your students. So please do, if any of that interests you, please do fill out the forms that Megan has created, and we will reach out.
Anyone who wants to ask a question here now?
I've got a question for Sue. How well do you think the Adirondack Park is doing in terms of providing good environment for species preservation and whatnot? And how does Vermont compare to the Adirondacks?
Well, that's a very localized question with some very local and I might add complicated answers that I kind of want to shy away from right now, given the larger theme of this webinar. But it's like everything else in life, Don. There's certainly some very strong qualities, and then there are some areas that need work in both states. And so it's an ongoing work in progress. And I think that's why I'm like Dave Anderson and so many here today. I'm committed to education. I'm committed to especially trying to work with our young people to prepare them for some of these very difficult subjects, so that we can all engage and come up with solutions that are fair, but also scientifically justified and effective. I think gone are the days when wild nature is there for our recreational pleasures. I think we now know better that wildlife need their privacy, and that habitats are better when they're fully diverse, and so on and so on. So these are going to be the challenges of now and in the future, and that's why I welcome these opportunities like Green Across the World.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so any other questions? It's a little bit after 6 o'clock. We are happy to run over a little bit more. If there are questions, we'll take those. Otherwise, again, the shout out to the link that Megan posted, where you can get in touch with us later at your convenience.
I will certainly add, there are I'm sure more than one member of the viewing audience who work for nonprofits, but both Green Across the World and Keeping Track are nonprofits, and I have yet to meet a nonprofit that turned down a contribution, although I might turn one down from the Koch brothers, come to think of it. But anyway, in general, we don't do that. And a plug for Keeping Track, this is actually for Sue's work. I'm going to share, this is a calendar for 2020 that I bought from Sue to help support her work in the Arctic. And I'm sure she'd be happy if you contacted Keeping Track to sell you the 2021. They are absolutely gorgeous. The photography is stunning. And I'd strongly recommend if you're interested in supporting her work in the Arctic, that you purchase one, and maybe one for somebody else in your family and another one for your friends. And, anyway, I'm sure both our websites have links to donate buttons and the like. So we certainly appreciate anything that you might consider along those lines.
And even just hearing from you, if today's webinar has moved you in any way, or if you have felt as a result of what was said today, empowered to work in your own community more effectively with your young people, we want to hear that. Those are the kinds of things that our funders are looking for. They're looking for testimonials, if you will, that really help underscore the importance of the organization in question. So we want to hear from
you. And to help you where we can. I mean, Green Across, I know Sue's as busy as ever, but Green Across the World has had to cancel all of our international in-person travel exchanges. So there's more time for us to help support your work through virtual means than there would be in a normal year. So please reach out if you can think of something we can do for you.
Okay, should we then officially say goodbye to each other? Based on what we just heard, we'll keep in touch. Please let us know if we can help. Go to the website, go to the link. I thank Sue, first and foremost, for a wonderful presentation and these beautiful pictures. I made a comment in the chat room. I would buy a calendar with those pictures, but then I just learned from Peter there actually is a calendar. Gorgeous pictures, and thank you for that. And thank you, Peter, for the presentation about Green Across the World. Thank you to Quinn for hosting us, did the technical part of this undertaking. We have to get used to Zoom, and I think it went out pretty well. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us here tonight. Take some time out of your busy evenings, and we all hope we'll see you again sometime soon. Be in touch, please.